So our opening agenda item is metrics. So I'm not sure how to always pronounce this. I call it the Amici. That might not be the correct phrase, but it's the Friends of the Court, the Albino Ministerial Alliance Coalition, and the Mental Health Association. They have proposed a set of metrics that they would like PCCEP to follow, or if you will, reach on a number of different topics. If we could, do we have a copy of that we can share the screen, or maybe pull up that we can go through and look at? Elliot, you're on mute.
Yeah, I've got a copy of it. Do you want me to share the screen?
Yeah, that would be perfect.
Okay, let me see if I could do it. Yeah.
Elliot, I've gone ahead and made you co-host, so you should have the capability. There you go.
Right. Okay. Oh wait, this is on the wrong screen. Well, I guess I could just move it down here. Oops. Okay. Could you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do it's a kind of long document. Would a better way be sharing it? Well, I guess we could just go through it. How do you propose lockdown and working through this?
I'm still muted. I think we could give an overview of it. Can you scroll down? How long is the document?
I know it's several pages.
Yeah, so I would just give an overview of it. Like, we can just, if you want to walk through it, or I can walk through it.
Well, I'll just say, so I got this document. Well, we got this well, Lockiana, since you got this document in May, why don't you talk about sort of the history of the document, and then I could.
Yeah, so this was put together by the Albino Ministerial Alliance and the Mental Health Association for what they believe would be the metrics to talk about success for PCCEP. It was presented to us in kind of an awkward way where we weren't quite sure if these were things that they were trying to say we had to do, or if these were suggestions, and it's kind of been worked out that these were suggestions. And we take it with the best of intentions, but it is quite a lengthy list. And so when it was first presented to us, we basically just went through it, listened to what their thoughts were on it, kind of gave some feedback as far as what we thought we could do. One of just the overall thoughts is just that there's a lot of stuff in here, right? And some of it we agreed with, and some of it we would like to be able to do, but as a practicality, it probably won't be able to do all of it. And then also, this was put together by them, and just with anything that PCCEP does, we like to get input from a lot of individuals, not just from them, but get feedback from us, especially if the document's going to go to us, but then also give it to the community as well. So if we just scroll down a little bit, I can just kind of walk through some of the things that are in it, or Elliot, if you want to talk through them, either or.
Yeah, so the first part is a list of.
I just want to say one thing real quick. Most of it, and MHA and AMAC have both stated a few times that a lot of it is things that PCCEP has always and still does today. So I wanted to let the community know that as well.
So the first part of it with that long list of organizations are organizations that they believe we should be reaching out to and in contact with as part of our community engagement. Then there's a whole section on public access, and saying that our meetings should be publicly recorded, and there are some specific things about modifying subcommittees having the possibility of modifying each proposal after receiving public testimony, public forums to talk about our sort of the status of our work of 4 times a year, So there's specific things about how they believe we could better do community outreach. Some of the things like this point 4 seem a little impractical, like a minimum of 2/3 of the attendees consisting of different communities of individual, different
Can you scroll
races.
down so we can see it?
Like, can you scroll? Yeah.
Okay, I can't see what you could see, but could you see it
Can
now?
you just send a link to that? Do we have a link to that so we can look at it on our own computers as well?
Okay, I could put it on my, why don't I put it on a Dropbox and send a link?
It's yeah. It's also doesn't seem to be moving with you. Like it seems like you're
Okay.
further down the page than we can see for some reason.
Okay, let me put it in a place where I could link it. Okay, now I have to be able to get to the chat, which I'm not sure I can get to. Wait here. I'm going to just stop sharing for a second so I can get to the chat. And then I'll put it in the, okay, that's the document. Is it better to share the document, or would everyone rather just look at it?
Share
Do
and
both? Okay. Okay. Okay, so can everyone see my shared screen now?
yep.
Okay, so point 4, it asks that 2/3 of attendees consist of different communities and individuals. And I and others had questions about how we would actually determine that without having people identify all sorts of personal information at every meeting, which
Elliot,
seems,
I can't see what you're doing.
You have to click on him.
I can't see the screen.
But every
I can't see.
um,
I don't know what you did, but it worked before, but now it's not working.
okay, because it says I'm screen sharing. Could other people see my
I've
screen?
seen it.
It's scrolling now.
Yeah, we can see it. Amy, can you see other participants in Zoom?
Yes,
Hmm.
I'm not getting the document, but that's okay because I have the document in front of me, so I guess it really doesn't matter.
Okay, so if you go to point 4, then on that document, in that section, anyway, there are things like that seemed difficult for us to actually accomplish. I think
On
there's
him.
a section on member retention, which
My whole screen went bad-ish.
I do kind of want
was trying to talk about, having people stay on PCEP, so retain at least 50% of members for a full year. And then there's a whole section on monitoring PCEP after the COCL is gone, and coming up with metrics. Do you want to, Lacana, talk a little bit about this section?
The monitoring piece of after am I mute? No, I'm not. Monitoring piece of after Coco's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can. I haven't looked through this section a ton. I can just kind of read through it. PCEP presents reports on the status of PCEP goals and metrics, perception of changes in policing or reviewing of actual PPP reforms, and city reports on actions taken in the prior 6 months. PCEP meets with community groups listed in PCEP filing documents at least once a year. That includes the Coalition of Communities of Color, AMAC, Portland Commission on Disabilities, Human Rights Commission, and New Portlander Policy Commission. For step 1, we have talked with the city about doing that. We actually just came off a meeting with some of the city staff, and prior to that, we had agreed that we want to do like a quarterly report to city council to give them updates on what we do. We haven't also produced a PCEP report in quite some time, so that one we're all on board with. PCEP meeting with these community groups. Another thing, we meet with AMAC. Some of these other ones we haven't or might. I think again, a good suggestion, and I think it's just like looking at a list of what makes sense, and then also time-wise what makes sense as well. Maintain an active list of available trained alternates. We are right in lockstep with that one. I know our staff are working hard. It's a tricky piece, just in the sense of when we have alternates, when we train a group of alternates, you know, if you're sitting on the sidelines for a committee and the committee doesn't have an opening for like 6 or 7 months, when you go back to the alternate pool, a lot of things have changed. But in theory, we agree with that 100%. Subcommittees make recommendations to general body at least 2 or 3 times a year. If the recommendation is not adopted, PCEP provides a written response. We do that. I don't think it's necessary to say how many they do. I mean, I think each subcommittee can kind of chart its own course. I think a healthy subcommittee is doing that. So agree with that one. Create a comprehensive, if you can scroll down just a little bit for me, Elliot. Create a comprehensive governance for all parts of PCEP so there's consistency in how subcommittees and PCEP operate, how recommendations are presented. Yeah, this is a great one too. And this one, I feel like we've almost kind of overcame. When PCEP first started, this was a challenge because like we didn't have consistency. There was like, how do recommendations come through? And it's kind of trial and error. And I think we've refined it. You know, we have a document that like a standard PCEP recommendation document that we go together. You know, subcommittees have operated and they know, you know, it's one of the things we work out too. Like when you put together a recommendation and you bring it to the whole committee, there's a lot of work that goes in there. And there's, you know, you try to separate your personal feelings from it, but you know, it happens. But we try and vote at an impartial basis. But I feel like we've kind of worked through some of the kinks that were originally there. Work with the auditor's office, which shall conduct annual comprehensive review of implementation of settlement agreement and assessment of use of force incidents. We have a great relationship with the auditor's office. We work with COCL too, that reviews some of those things. The Training Advisory Committee just put out an awesome report last week on use of force. I think the main thing with this one is just having access to data. And I know PCEP's been having a lot of conversations lately around data and how we get access to it. So again, as I just went through all those, that's basically how the entire document reads. It's either things we're doing or things we agree with. There's nothing really in here that we technically disagree with. It's just a matter of capacity, whether we want to make some of those things like things that have to be set in stone, like I said, like requiring a subcommittee to make 2 or 3 recommendations. I don't think that's something that needs to be put in there. But I also don't see a point where a place where a subcommittee wouldn't produce 3 of those recommendations. PCEP work product. PCEP develops metrics to measure possible bias in policing stops in conjunction with presentation of annual stops data. Okay. PCEP makes recommendations to PPB directors at least 3 or 4 times a year. PCEP assesses implementation of settlement agreement and any future reforms at least annually. PCEP reports to city, council, and community. Yeah, in theory, agree with all of those. And that's just my opinion. I think I'm just going to be quiet now, but I mean, those are my interpretations, kind of just reading through, giving you a sense of what we want. And I think it's just up to PCEP as a whole to see what is possible. And I think from the Amici groups from the Mental Health Alliance and the Albina Ministerial Alliance and Mental Health Association Alliance, one of those 2. I think that they hand these off to us now with the intention of we will do our best to incorporate these, or maybe we have a future meeting and discuss these further. But I think what will be most helpful for us is for them to hand them off like, hey, here's our recommendations. We would like to see you implement some of these, but then allowing us to have the autonomy to ultimately decide what works for us. And considering, you know, we know best our workload. All of our members right now work an incredible amount. Me and Ann have been on PCEP calls just today since 3. a lot of other members since 4. So, you know, we put in a lot of work, and there's a lot of stuff that could be done in a lot of directions that we could go in. And one of the things PCCEP is going to be looking at doing is codifying PCCEP in the city code. And I think that these are some things we could take into consideration as we kind of frame out how we want to see our committee written into the city bylaws. So that's my thoughts on all of this.
So I guess we should first hear from PCCEP members what they think about this. We're going to be meeting, various of us are having meetings with Jason Renaud of the Mental Health Association to talk about this. So it'd be helpful to sort of have feedback about this document.
Yeah, so what I would like to do in opening it up to PCCEP feedback is just, instead of going through the whole document, just is there something I would like to hear from PCCEP members, ones that they either agree with, disagree with, or any other overall comments on it?
I think I'd like to say that, as Elliot said, Jason Renaud has reached out to members and is having meetings with PCCEP, various PCCEP members, to discuss this further. And I know that I'm participating in a meeting on Friday, so I will share that information with PCCEP members.
Thank you, Ann. Other PCCEP comments on these?
Yeah, I just want to add, I also had a conversation with Jason. He reached out to me. I was trying to find my notes, but it sounds like there's a lot of, like, I think like you already said, we're doing a lot of the things that are already in this this document. So I don't think you all will say anything different. I'm not able to make the Friday meeting, so I'll follow up afterwards, but I don't have any major comments.
Latiana, if I might, the only thing that I saw in there that was a little concerning was it was written pre-COVID, and a lot of the things in there don't kind of describe the current environment we're in, the landscape, and there's not much really in there around racial equity. There's a little bit one-liner, but it's not really focused on anything of major substance of, you know, where are we going to go with the Black Lives Matter movement. You know, there's a lot of people wanting us to incorporate change, and some of the metrics kind of need to reflect that, I think. That we need to at least get some updated thoughts or sections around looking at, oh, now that we're in COVID, what makes more sense? You know, because this, like I said, this was written pre-COVID, so there's no reference in there to what we have to do given our limited opportunity or greater opportunity with Zoom, however you want to look at it. So that's just my comment, is I would like some updates that bring it current.
I agree.
Yeah, I will bring that up. I also wanted to mention that I did talk with Jason, and he spoke about, and I noticed it's not in this document, about the need or the desire to have a staff person who is a community organizer that would reach out to various groups. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that idea on Friday at our meeting, and I'll share that.
Yeah, I know we've discussed, yeah, I thought I saw it in there too. Yeah.
But wasn't that decided long ago that we hired Theo and Claudia and Judith to not hire a community engagement coordinator separately? Or has that never been discussed?
There was, the community organizers always kind of been floated as like a possible position to help with things. And we've had a number of debates internally, whether that would be the best use of our funds and things of that nature. So, but Theo and Claudia are not replacements for that, but I think, Theo, you might have something else to add to it. So,
sure. I think us as PCCEP staff are always interested in having additional staff. I think the position would look different right now, and we also, we wouldn't be able to hire for another full-time position in this fiscal year. So we'd be looking for next fiscal year. But I think it would be of great service if PCCEP, as if you all thought it would be useful, then great. Then that's something that we can discuss. I wanted to bring to your attention, since I'm already talking, just a couple of things in the document that were striking to me. The announce at least three weeks in advance the meetings and various news outlets. I think that 3 weeks is more than any other committee in the city would do. And I also think if that was adopted to 2 weeks, then that would be cool. But also, I think there needs to be a caveat in there for special listening sessions, and there is for special meetings, there is that, but it's not in this document explicitly, and I would like to see it there. And we talked about this a little bit in the previous meeting that I wish you all were at, but it discusses conducting community surveys. And I think there's PCCEP dollars already allocated to PCCEP surveys, if that's the direction that you all want to go, but we don't want to mandate a survey specifically from DHM if that's not going to be useful for the committee. So surveys can happen, but you all as PCCEP members know your community best, and I know you all know this, but just because the community is not always aware of what we say as a PCCEP team, you all know your committees and your communities best. So you know what would be useful to have a survey on, or if you all would benefit from soliciting information via survey. You all know best, and you all can have those conversations. A little bit further down the document, they discuss 50%, maintaining 50%, retain at least 50% of PCCEP members for a full year. I think that's out of everybody's control. I know that Andrew, our previous co-chair, was one of the most dedicated members that we had, and he bought a house. That's not something that folks can really account for because people have lives, and it's also a global pandemic. And we can't really account for people having things happen. So I think the 50% on paper would be a conversation for you all to have. If you all thought it was reasonable, then great. If not, then that should be a further conversation. But sticking out 50%, it seems a bit arbitrary to my eyes, but I don't know what you all think, and I think everybody would benefit from hearing from you and the community about that. I think the rest of it looks cool. Let me, I know that I had one more, but I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know it's not even time for staff comment. So I'll just stop there, and then I'll circle back if something else happens. But yeah.
Cool. Let's open it up to public comment. We are behind on time, so just want to be cognizant that we're moving forward. Yep. So yeah, community comment. If you can raise your hand, and we'll get you on the list, or just yeah. Barb, go ahead. You there, Barb? Yeah, we can now.
Okay. I too had a conversation with Jason Renaud last week about other things that he and I are working on. But I asked him what the heck was up with all this skulking around, you guys. And he didn't give a really good straight up reason, but he basically said Judge Simon asked for metrics. I wasn't there. And all y'all need to do is just come up with a list and bring it to him on Friday, pushing back on what his list is. If I remember right, is this the one where there's the list of all the different organizations to reach out with? That includes organizations that no longer exist, such as Portland City Portland Committee on disability, which is PCOD, and other ones that were like on there twice, kind of. So I just want you guys to be prepared to just go back and forth over this till people are happy. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. And part of the understanding of that too is just that these are not things that we have to implement. You know, obviously we value that relationship with the Amici, and so we are definitely going to take all these into consideration, and considering we're doing a lot of them already. But yeah, just not feeling like we have to be forced into these, but that we appreciate, and in any group that would give us a list like this to help further our success.
The only thing we have to also be cognizant of is that if the people who are parties to this settlement agree to these metrics, then in February they're going to go before the judge, and that's one of the things the judge will measure the success of PCCEP on, which is of course what's hanging in the balance for the whole settlement agreement. So in that sense, what this document and the metrics ends up being actually is of great import for the future of whether the settlement agreement is passed or not.
I wasn't saying it wasn't important. I was
No,
just saying,
I know. I was just
well,
right. Yeah, I understood that.
the other thing about the document with the social media that said you guys needed to have X number of followers on these different platforms, I would really, really, really be careful of committing to anything like that, because that is super duper outside of your purview. Advertising or outside of your control. Advertising somewhere isn't outside of your control, but you know, those are my two main thoughts. And and to be clear, I am very clear about not representing PCCEP in any way, shape, or form, like when I was talking to Jason.
Thanks, Barb. We're going to go next with Stephen. Or is it Stefan?
It's Stephen, actually.
Okay.
So thanks. I don't know anything about this document. It's the first time I've seen it, or about the consequences of not fulfilling expectations that are laid out in the document. But my background's in continuous quality improvement, and I'm wondering if there's any way to reframe the conversation about these are our goals. These are the standards we'd love to move toward. We're not going to be perfect, and we may not achieve them all first time out of the gate, but we're committed to getting better and better and getting closer and closer to the target. So that's just my thought about it, just from my background.
Thank you. That's the framework you feel like we should take?
I'm just wondering if that's a possibility. I don't really know what the document is used for. I don't know what the consequences are of committing to something right out of the gate and saying, yes, we're going to do it this way. It would be a lot easier if we could say, yeah, these are great goals. We're going to work toward them. But can we, be realistic about our resources, choose our battles, I guess, and do our best. Find out, do a problem analysis. If we don't fulfill the target, if we don't make the target the first time out, do some kind of barrier analysis. What's in the way of doing better, and just commit to getting better and better and closer to the goal. That's just how you do it in quality improvement, right? And performance improvement. Just a thought. It's just a different framework.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, I think that's basically the approach that we're trying to take. I don't think there's any real consequences of this other than maintaining a good relationship with both of these groups, and considering most of these things are fairly reasonable. I think that they would work for us to take them on.
I was just curious when somebody said something about the success of PCCEP will be measured by this, and has implications for your organization going forward. I was confused about that. And this isn't part of the settlement agreement, or any other legally binding.
It's not.
Okay.
So in February, the parties will go before the judge, and the PCCEP is the last piece of the settlement agreement that it needs to be checked off. So one of the things that the parties are interested in is the community engagement piece of PCCEP. And so to that extent, it is what will help determine whether the settlement agreement is seen as being in substantial compliance or not.
Okay, thank
At
you.
least that's how I understand it. Vadim, you might have is that your understanding? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Okay, we're gonna take 2 more questions in this section. We got Trebi and Susan. Just be cognizant of time. We'd like to wrap this up by 6:15 at the latest. Just- Go ahead, Trebi.
Yeah, okay, this is Trebi. 2 questions I have. One is kind of referring to what Elliot said. So what I'm gathering is it's really important that you kind of stand your ground here and say, this is what we can and can't do, so that if in February they come and say that PCCEP hasn't lived up to the things in this document, that's really important to say, we committed to this, and these we have as an ideal and we're moving towards them. So is that true? Like, it's really important what you agree to now, because they could come back in February and say you didn't do it?
Well, I hope that wouldn't be the approach that they would take. I mean, I'm sure that they could, but I would hope that as 2 groups that have helped form PCCEP and have been a part of this process for a long time, that they would. There's no way that PCCEP's not going to operate and not be working towards these. Even if this didn't, like this, a lot of these things, even before we've seen this document, we were doing these. And so what I hope happens is that after this meeting on Friday and further meetings, that we are able to incorporate some of this feedback into what we are already doing and utilize it, but that does not then be used against us to say, hey, PCCEP didn't do the 20 things that we outlined that we thought, right? Because of, in the spirit of this, I believe this is something that they, unless we just totally decide like, hey, we're not going to do any of these things and we go in the opposite direction, which just isn't the case. I would hope that they would, as we work this out, that they see it, that we are working on these and not then use this as a barometer to say PCCEP isn't doing what we believe PCCEP should do. So I'm hoping that that's not the case.
And also too, Lakiana, you guys are just, once you get codified, I mean, you're a whole new thing. I mean, you're creating yourself all brand new. So I think that's really important for you guys to have plenty of room to be able to do that. To say that these are things that, especially the times we're in right now, that we would really like to focus on. I think that's important to honor what they're saying, but also keep the freedom to be able to form yourselves sort of organically. And the other question that I have is, are they going to help you with any of these things that they recommended? Did they also say anything about how they could support you in them?
I don't think we have yet, but I would hope that they can. Someone's else supposed to say something.
They do some of the training, as they note, training of PCCEP members, and I'm sure there's other things. I think we'll have a better understanding after our meeting on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, it's to the extent they can. And that's part of all this too, is, as we incorporate these things into our plan, our hope is that we can have more support from these both. At least the Mental Health Association has been critical of PCCEP in the past at the hearings. And I think that that's been unhelpful to PCCEP's progress, especially seeing as how hard we are working. Anytime we fall short on any of these metrics is not due to a negligence of us, but just the sheer amount of work that we're doing with a volunteer body. I mean, there's only so much we can get done. And yeah, that's all saying that. We need to move to the next question just so that we can get other folks in here. So I'm going to have Susan answer the question as our final one in this section.
Okay, I just wanted to offer, in response to kind of what you were saying, is that this actually is a natural response. My software development background kind of says people always come with you with a solution, and your job is to figure out what is that need, the actual need, the underlying need that they're trying to get with the solution that they're giving you. Because if you start fighting the solution, you're missing the point. You got to get to the need and then figure out what PCCEP's solution is to that need and what your metric is, and provide it. Because what they're doing is they're telling you they want more from you, which is okay. So now what you do is just take what that need is and figure out how to place it within what you're doing.
Appreciate that feedback. I was going to say something, and yeah, I'm going to close it up. I think Judith has something to add. Judith, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say the city, we've been training everybody in this method called results-based accountability using a social justice lens. And it's been really helpful. And I don't know who was just speaking, but it goes a lot to what you were just saying, that figuring out it's about outcomes, not outputs. So instead of you contacted 25 newspapers, it's, you had 10 people from that community that you were outreaching to show up at a meeting. And when we were meeting with the judge, one of the issues was there was a lot of focus on attendance, and we have much better attendance now through Zoom, partly because people have nothing else to do, but also partly because it's more accessible. So just to say that it would be great to think about what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve and to what end. That's all that I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Judith. We are going to move on to recommendation status, discussing creating a spreadsheet for recommendations and the status of them. This is something I kind of discussed a little earlier about, like, the process of us creating recommendations and just the evolution that's taken. This has been discussed before. I don't know who brought this up, so I'd love to defer to whose idea this was.
I brought this up, and I was thinking that maybe I was seeing this in conjunction with the quarterly reports or reports, because essentially if I go or you go to the PCCEP website and try to look at our recommendations, the way the website is set up, through no fault of PCCEP or the staff, it's very hard to see a chronological list or to know which ones were approved, which ones weren't. So what I was recommending is that the staff compile a list of all of our statements and recommendations in chronological order from the beginning of PCCEP until now, and then have columns that say which subcommittee proposed it, or if a person proposed it, whether it was approved or not. If we have the votes should be recorded, and then have columns for what the status is. Is this still pending? Have we received a response from the city? If we received a response, is the work on that, if they say they're going to carry this forward, is that in progress, or has it been completed? And that way the public and the PCCEP and people in the city could look at our work product and say, okay, PCCEP is making these recommendations. How many of them are actually accomplishing anything at the back end? Then how I was thinking about it is, once we have that information, we could start drafting a report that talks about our work product and what has been accomplished by the city at their end, and also talk about membership, which is something that the metrics points to. So a sort of complete report for someone interested in evaluating PCCEP where we're at. And so I think that compiling this document will help us produce that report.
Theo, go ahead.
Yeah, Elliot, thanks. Staff and the rest of the staff and I have talked about this, and I think it's a great thing. So I've decided to take that on and I'll be compiling that, and I've started compiling that, but I'll be compiling that until not this Friday, but next Friday. So if you can give me until then I can share it with PCCEP distribution, and then if you're all cool with it, then we can pitch it out far and wide.
Great, thank you. I know it's a lot of work.
Okay, let's open it up to PCCEP comment. Thoughts, insight on this?
I just wanted to say that I can also, once Theo does that part of the recommendation organization, I can also make it to where the PCCEP website has a tab like you had suggested before, Elliot, where it says like pending recommendations and then like approved recommendations, because I know right now with the way that the website is set up, it's a little difficult to, with the organization of which ones are approved, which ones haven't been approved. So then that way it's a little easier for folks to know which recommendations are actually have been approved and which ones are pending. So I can make 2 separate tabs.
Speaking of which, I haven't ever really figured out what's up with the recommendations. I know there's a reason for them being there like all over the place, like they don't go in order. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, it's just the way the structure of the website is with the city. Like I've reached out to the technology services, and there's not really much. I mean, it drives me crazy just not having that like A to Z or from 1 to 10. So I'm hoping that once we get converted with the new new city website, that way we can have more control of how to organize files just in general, because right now it is a lot confusing and there's not much I can do about it from my end.
But I think once we have this document, how I'm imagining it, it would actually have the links in the document so that we could have a link to that document on the web page. People can go to it and see the recommendations and click on the ones they're interested in.
The last recommendation I have, speaking of website, is one of the feedbacks I got the other day was if we could put the roles of the PCCEP members on there and then even include our emails. I think that might be helpful. But someone said they went to the website and it's true. And when you go to PCCEP member bios, it doesn't say who's what. So like,
I would second that. That was one of the biggest things that Jason kind of was concerned about, not being able to outreach to members really easily. So I think putting our contact information out there, because he ended up emailing me via my work county email, and I think maybe contacted Ann, I think through like LinkedIn. So we definitely need to be more easily accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
For you.
Yeah, if you guys like, I can add your guys's like roles and your guys's PCCEP emails to like the contact tab, and that way that if folks want to contact members individually, they have
great
along with your city emails.
I think we can.
I have a question or a thought.
Say something, then let's bounce right to you.
Mine was just going to be really quick, Amy. I'll just be really quick. If you have multiple roles, make sure you mention which one, or if you want both of them mentioned in the on your name thing, because I know that some of you have multiple roles, whether it be as a co-chair or member of the steering committee, as well as a chair of the subcommittee. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, what I wanted to mention was a while back, I don't know if you guys remember, I suggested going through the recommendations and color coding like availability of how can it be done, how soon it can be done using the red, yellow, and green coloring, because some things we can get done much sooner and other things are going to take longer. And I think it's important for people to understand which ones are going to take more time to achieve. So maybe, because I've seen a lot of documents color-coded, and boy, it's really easy to tell at a glance which recommendations are easily moved forward and which ones require a little more research or investigation. So some sort of color coding to which ones we can do now and which ones we need like all these other people involved to get done. So if there's any way to do that, I would surely appreciate it.
I think that's a great idea. One thing about the roles, in addition to putting up our roles, I think we also discussed about the lack of clarity about what each of these roles actually means or does. So what does it mean to be co-chair? What does it mean to be alternate co-chair? What does it mean to be secretary and chair of a subcommittee? And so I think part of what we could do on the steering committee, not right now, is defining these roles.
Right. We talked about putting that on our agenda at a future time.
And we also talked about redoing the bylaws to incorporate the right information inside the bylaws and maybe reviewing the PCCEP plan. But I figured we'd do that after we get codified. So some things may have to wait.
I think it's really important, just I don't want to get too far off trail or anything like that, but I do think it's really important before the codification process happens that these discussions be at the forefront of just choosing the direction of PCCEP after the settlement agreement. That needs to happen before any codification happens, and the steering committee can say more to that if they so desire.
Yeah, why don't we try and, go ahead.
No, I mean, I actually see it's on our agenda, the officer roles, so maybe we should actually try to define. I think for the co-chairs, maybe it's clearer that co-chairs help facilitate the meetings, the general board meeting and the steering committee meeting. I think what's less clear is the role of the alternate co-chair, having been one, and the secretary. So I don't know, Vadim, as a secretary, what is your understanding of the role?
Can we actually just table that till we get to the next part so we don't get too far off track of the original part where we were just at with the spreadsheet?
Okay, sure.
Yep, just so we stay focused on it. Is there any more comment on the spreadsheet, or I guess we can also include any changes on the website? I think that would also be helpful to hear from the community on those two as well. So I'd like to open it up to community comment on the spreadsheet and what they'd like to see on that, or anything related to the website that would be more helpful for them to see and access and have information to. If you can just raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, or physically raise your hand if you're able to. Any community comment? Going once, going twice. Okay, cool. Let's flip it to that conversation. And so the next thing on our agenda, if I can just pull it up here, is discussing preparing a report for PCCEP activities over the last 2 years and defining PCCEP roles. Let's move the roles to the first part, and then we can discuss a report on the last 2 years. So Elliot, back to you. You were saying something.
Yeah, I mean, I think my understanding is that the co-chair roles are pretty clear. It's the secretary and the alternate co-chair role that probably needs some defining. So maybe we could start with the secretary and with Vadim explaining what he sees the role of the secretary as.
Yeah, initially when I started doing this, it was with the intent of sort of being the parliamentarian, knowing what the bylaws say, knowing what the settlement agreement might have to say. And so whenever there's any issues with respect to process procedures, to be able to discuss that. I tried for a while to also be a reminder of when we needed to have meetings with, say OEHR director or staff from civic life and those sort of things to keep us on track with the actual requirements of the PCCEP plan. I think my first meeting I took notes, but now that it's, since then it's been pretty much recorded every time. So that's not as necessary. But yeah, as a parliamentarian for, I don't know if a secretary is a proper term anymore for any kind of committee or commission.
I mean, I guess one thing I could see a secretary doing based on other organizations that I'm part of is making sure that the say the recommendations, for a while, recommendations weren't being forwarded to the city. And of course, the staff is supposed to be doing that, but kind of overseeing and making sure the processes of the PCEP, like you're saying, are actually functioning.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We can discuss who would be the best person to maybe bring forth that recommendation. Certainly the secretary could transmit that to whatever city official and CC the staff. I'm not sure whether Thea or Claudia does it at this point, but it might be a way to both present the recommendation and also be a conduit for receiving feedback and tracking on that as well. That does sound like a good idea.
I was also wondering about the reporting that I've heard a number of times about reports that we're supposed to be doing. Where would that fall in line? What would that look like?
I mean, in terms of the report, the way I envisioned it is that the staff, like Theo has, I think, agreed to draft. The staff might draft the report or pieces of the report, and then it would be this steering committee as a whole, I think, who would actually finalize that, and then it would go to the whole committee to approve that report, which would then be sent to the city and made public.
Well, I know that. Sorry, Luckiana, go ahead.
Nope, you're up. Go ahead.
Okay. I know that the recommendation piece is something that I think is well within the staff purview. I think in the past, Judith can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, I think PCEP members did it for the sake of independence and autonomy and the PCEP voice. But if you all envision staff being taking the lead with PCEP committee approval on that, then I think that would be a great idea. But I think it should be a conversation for the committee, and if you all felt comfortable with staff filling in that role and providing some reports for you all to report on, then I think that absolutely, that sounds great.
I like the idea. I like the idea of PCEP writing the reports, just because it does stick to our voice, and it's a I think meeting minutes and things like that can be very long and tedious and take more time than we have. But I think just in the same sense of recommendations, I think there is a merit to them doing that. Yeah, Andrew had done the reports initially. I think that's something that the secretary could organize, is like documents, or being the person that has copies of things, or Vadim, you're kind of the guru on the bylaws. I don't know if you were suggesting changing the name of secretary, but I think I would agree with that, because I feel like, I don't know, when you think about secretary, just kind of gets this loaded term, and yeah, it's just kind of this secondary job or whatnot, and we want that role to be something that is useful that has a real function on the steering committee. So I think maybe it's just sitting down sometime and identifying what are the needs of the steering committee and what roles could that individual fill could be part of it.
What?
Real quick, the information that everyone's looking for is in the PCEP plan on page 6. It says, on a quarterly basis, gather input from Portlanders regarding experiences with and perceptions of PPB's community outreach. Input will be gathered through culturally responsive and relevant strategies that center on the needs of the communities. And then it goes, general consultation with the Office of Community and Civic Life, district coalitions, coalition of communities of color, Civic Life's diverse civic leadership partners, and AMAC. And then evaluate national best practices regarding police and community engagement, leading to bias-free policing. So some of these things that everybody's talking about is mixed in the PCEP plan, the bylaws, and the other material documents that are out there. So it all goes by what you guys want to use as what is something we should be following, because that's a lot right there in that one paragraph.
So Judith said,
Well, I think it calls for these quarterly reports, and as Dan notes, we haven't been doing them. So I think, you know, let's do a report that sort of covers the last 2 years, and then I think we need to get on a schedule. But maybe that would be a good role for the secretary, at least, to make sure that even if the secretary is not drafting the report, that, you know, hey, we need to be doing this, and this is the deadline, to make sure it gets done. Because I think what we don't want to be doing is just letting these things drop by the wayside when it's part of our plan. We're supposed to be reporting to the community.
Right. It's when Andrew was doing them, what was his role?
He just kind of took a stab at it, you know, just kind of had an intrinsic idea of like just kind of like sewing things up, wrote it up, sent it to us, and then we kind of went on that. I think maybe if we put together like a guide, like a template, like, hey, this is what the report format should look like, kind of like we do with recommendations. Here's the things that we want to include, like all the recommendations that were done, the successes, the challenges. Then anybody, rather than relying on like someone who just kind of intrinsically gets it, like having a standard process that someone could follow that anybody could do, and then just assigning it out. And then maybe that's how it's done. Like the secretary is in charge of making sure someone does, and it doesn't have to fall on any one individual. Like the secretary could be in charge of like making sure someone does it, but it doesn't have to be set like so-and-so is going to do it every month. Maybe someone, you could rotate it or spread the love out with that.
How do you feel about that, Vadim?
I like that idea. It kind of aligns with my initial view, which is, you know, there's certain requirements that we have to fulfill, and somebody needs to keep track of those requirements, whether it be the meetings or the presentations or city council presentations. And so, you know, certainly I can create a calendar with all those things in there. And then, you know, as we get closer, decide how to apportion the work or who wants to take that on or so on. I've not had any experience drafting one of these reports, but I'm sure I can take a look at it and see, you know, how to update them. But yeah, that's a really good idea. Just kind of lay out meeting times, quarterly do this, you know, yearly do this, meet with these people on such a basis, and then keeping track of the correspondence as it goes in and out to the mayor's office, the police chief, and so forth.
Yeah, I think that could be like something like an accountability coordinator, like it's the person who's just like keeping track of that. Like until Elliot bring it up in our last meeting that we had a quarterly report, I was like, completely forgot about that. And by having that based in a position, like, you know, if we change the secretary to the accountability coordinator or something similar to that, when you see the qualifications for what that role would do, then people who have that type of mind would be good for that position. And right, because I'm telling you right now, I would be terrible at that. That's not where my mind works or does best. And so, you know, and then that helps the co-chairs who are more of the public facing, like facilitating meetings, representing PCCEP at presentations. You know, they got someone who's like, hey, this is something that y'all, you know, this is the next thing that's coming up. These are the things that we need to do. As a matter of fact, having like a document that says for that coordinator person to say like, here's all the things that need to be done, you know, and to make sure that PCCEP's doing them. And that could even go into things that the subcommittees are supposed to do in tapping the co-chairs and be like, hey, you don't want to give them too much work because that sounds like it could start getting into a lot, but something where they're keeping track of the logistics and things that we have to get done sounds reasonable to me.
So I like Lakiana's idea that it should be in PCCEP's voice, but I also like the idea of the staff doing some of the collation, because I think this is going to be could be a lot of work at the beginning, especially. So it could be a combination where the staff collates the information and then, you know, either the secretary or someone else puts it together and then the whole body approves it. But let's rely on our staff who are really excellent at, and sort of have an overview of everything we've been doing also.
Agreed. Any other piece of comment before we open it up to any thoughts on from the community? Well, yeah, hang on, let me pull this up. The other piece we were supposed to look at was preparing a report on activities for PCCEP. I think we table that for right now. I think we know we need to get something like that, unless there's anything you want to add to it. But I'm just looking at time and some of the other things.
No, we've discussed it.
Cool.
Did we want to discuss the alternate role?
Yes, good point.
So
So I'll just say, when I was the alternate, I didn't understand what that role was. I mean, I was part of the steering committee. So what is there any specific thing that Anne or other people think the alternate should be playing?
I think they should assist the secretary role. I also think that they should slide into any role that opens up. I don't get why you would have an alternate and then when this position opens up that they're not automatic. Like, why would we vote? Because then it's like someone who is not an alternate can just come in and fill that. I mean, maybe there's a vote or something, because there could be some considerations, like in the fact that, let's say, like right now, there might be a position, opportunity where like maybe the steering committee's missing something, and so you might want to vote like there's no women on it or there's no people of color on it, and so it's like the next person to slide in at that alternate position might just be more of the same. It's like, okay, maybe we want to consider a special election, but I think, yeah, that's right. Go ahead. Yep.
My understanding is that I would be assisting and learning more from the steering committee members. I don't understand that sliding into different slots and assisting the secretary, which, you know, I'm just not understanding that part of it.
Lakiana,
Elliot, let me.
Position created originally. When was the alternate chair?
Right at the beginning. It was brought at the beginning when we had two co-chairs, we had our secretary and someone else who wanted to serve, and so we said as a kind of, I can't think of the word right now, but you know, like a conciliation or whatnot, we are going to give this person an alternate role. And
okay,
courtesy and kind of like, yeah, just kind of like, I don't know, not just necessarily courtesy, but something. But then, yeah, but they were able to help represent, so it kind of made the steering committee slightly bigger. And so they were able to attend different things and support. So they kind of had like an unofficial capacity backup.
Would you say the same needs are here now as there was then?
I think that, so sometimes the steering committee has to vote, and we haven't had to vote in a while. I can't even remember what we used to vote on in particular, but there's an opportunity that you could split the vote.
Huh? The steering committee voted on recommendations, didn't we? A couple months ago?
Sometimes the steering committee has to make decisions, but I don't know. We've had to do some votes in the past. I'm not quite sure what they were. We don't vote on recommendations though. But I think.
Yeah, we do.
I think, I don't know. I don't know what the necessary need is. It's a good question of the alternate. I think that there is a possibility for it, but I'm not exactly sure what that is. I think in the absence of someone missing, I think they could fill in for that role. Like, let's say someone's out of town for a month, right? For the May meeting, then that other person can help facilitate. Like, it could be a good training position too for people who are wanting to be in the chair roles.
Can I ask a question, Elliot? When you were the alternate, what was your feeling about that? Because I've heard what Lakiana, and I understand that, but I'm just kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of like a shadowing position. Like, I would go to the steering committee. I would, so I was aware of all the stuff going on, and I understood it that if, you know, someone was away, that I would slide into that role of co-facilitating. You know, and I also thought perhaps if, like, when Andrew left, there wouldn't need to be a special election, but our bylaws or whatever calls for that. But that does seem to be, if we want to change our bylaws, a possibility to just have that alternate person slide into that role if someone left before the end of their term, and I would be in favor of that.
Or just of not having an alternate co-chair in November, right? Because that would be the other possibility of just in November, when the officer positions are going to be available for folks to run for again, or just not having that alternate co-chair position, because I think Judith had more of the history when it was first formed in those conversations, those initial conversations with the facilitator, who was initially helping with the PCCEP plan. But I think in the place of assisting the steering committee and being on those calls and being another voice and helping where folks need to help, I think that it makes sense. But outside of that, especially if this secretary is going to shift toward an accountability officer, I don't know where the alternate co-chair would be, but I think that would be a good conversation to have with all of PCCEP.
So we have to do an amendment to our bylaws and have them out for 30 days before we can make any changes in November. That's the rules around bylaw changes. They have to be out 30 days with amendments before we can enact and change anything. So if you want to do it, we should do it now. And just do an amendment to the bylaws and then put that out for a vote, and it has to sit out for 30 days, and then we can move on it in by November.
Okay, I'm just thinking about the time. It's 6:46. We want to end by 7. We've got 2 more things on the agenda, one of which we definitely have to accomplish, which is setting the agenda. I'm wondering whether we've sort of had a robust conversation and could sort of think about this, and then by the next meeting, thinking about Amy's point about timing, we would still have time to move forward with any changes to the bylaws if we wanted to do that.
Yep, I think this goes to a conversation we had earlier. We need to start kind of seeing where we want PCCEP to go. Look at the roles, look at all of it, look at the scope, and I think this can be part of that larger conversation. And Elliot, I appreciate you getting us back on track for close out at 7. Yeah. We do have to have public comment though. So quickly, any public comment on the roles of PCCEP on, yeah.
See that Dan posted something in the chat. Do you want me to read that, Dan, or do you want to read that? Or
It's just he said it's just an FYI.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all y'all doing just, yeah, appreciate that. That's helpful for us so we can get through some of these things. Agenda for the August meeting.
Well, for Lakiana, are we going to do the police directives, or are we going to kick that down
I would
the
say
road?
we have to, we're 12 minutes
Yeah,
from finishing
right.
to do that, to do the agenda. Thanks for bringing that up. I thought I just forgot to mention it. Yeah, so agenda for August, do we have subcommittees that have reports? I'm not even sure what else is supposed to be on there, if you have anybody coming in. Otherwise, I have a thought, but is there anything that needs to be on the agenda before I share that thought, or does anybody else have ideas?
I don't know if that is the space or at our next steering committee meeting to talk about the Portland Police Bureau directives. Maybe we can just move that forward.
What is that in exactly?
Well, that is kind of reviewing those. It's my understanding that that those have a community component that we could maybe look at some of those directives, kind of add them to our meetings so that if anyone had some comment about them, they have a certain period of time when there's community feedback. But I also understand that there are certain directives that we can look at again. We can pull them out and look at them again, such as possibly the use of force directive. So that's what I was thinking of when I suggested that.
Got it. So you're saying that this would just be a space ongoing in our meetings to review any PPB directives, any new ones that came up?
And to allow for public comment and maybe our comment on them.
Yeah. Interestingly enough. Okay. So do you want to add that to the August agenda?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
I had one.
Just so I can understand, y'all are there specific directives y'all wanting to look at in August, or are you saying add the idea of discussing adding directives permanently to our meetings? That's what you want to discuss.
Judith is saying, should one subcommittee take that on? Yeah, that's.
I'm not understanding, like this directive, this one that she just posted, what, are we talking about a specific directive or directives? Okay.
Was I the person that brought this up to be put on our agenda? I think I was. I was suggesting that we look at the Police Bureau objectives or directives rather. There are some that are open for public comment that we could discuss in our meeting and get some additional public comment and PCCEP comment and give that to the Police Bureau. There's also, I understand, the ability for PCCEP to revisit some of the directives that are already have gone through that process and relook at them. For instance, the use of force directive.
Got it. Got it. And Elliot, you were saying you did want to put that up on the agenda for.
Yeah, I think reviewing those directives, which is one of our jobs, we should be reviewing those directives. So having public comment on that is good. I think policing of protests is clearly still like one of the big issues of policing in the city. I was on a conversation today where the new DA, Mike Schmidt, was part of that conversation. And as you know, at a press conference, he laid out a sort of philosophy on how to deal with the protests. And I think he's going to be laying out more policies. I think it would be really helpful to have Mike, the DA, come and talk about sort of the philosophy of the DA's office, the new philosophy around policing of not only protests, but other kind of policing issues. And one thing that I've heard from a lot of community members as we're in this impasse is, you know, where the community says, oh, they don't want the police to use tear gas, and then the police say, well, what do you want us to do? Is try to have a real conversation with the police and the community about how do we create an environment where people could express their First Amendment rights, and the police could also do what they're charged with doing, which is stopping people from committing crimes. And I think that that dialogue hasn't happened yet. And, you know, I don't have any hopes that we're all going to sit down and sing Kumbaya, but there might be some creative ideas in the community about de-escalation or tactics that the police could use. And I think it would just be helpful to have a conversation, not only with the police leadership, but like people who are the cops who are out there every day, and like hearing from them, and maybe them hearing from the community, and trying to figure out a way through this impasse.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think that would be really useful for our time and our community.
So that seems, yeah, so a couple thoughts I had on that. Just reading the comments in there. I thought, so today, I'm just saying this to everybody else on this call, we still have to send out a message to the rest of PCCEP, but we had a meeting with the mayor's office and PPB, the steering committee did, around codifying PCCEP and that process. And I think it would be great to devote some of the time of this month's meeting to getting to some of that work. I think we have to start, that's going to be that's a large lift. And so taking some, chunking that out into the next several meetings. So I think that would be a good thing to add to the agenda. But then also think that what you had mentioned as well is also a good suggestion, Elliot, but it also feels like it almost could be its own thing as well. Because from what you're suggesting, like having some officers share their perspectives, maybe having some community members, that would go over an hour if you wanted to do that right without like just cramming it in there. So just open to those two thoughts.
That could be maybe another meeting, another town hall meeting where you bring together those groups, maybe the mayors, some people from the mayor's office.
I know Theo has a thought on that too.
I do. I was just thinking, per conversations about PCCEP going in a direction after the settlement agreement and filling the lane of elevating the voice of the community. Elliot's idea could be a really great kind of trampoline to elevate that idea of the direction after the settlement agreement, really continuing to elevate the voice of the community by bringing those parties together and soliciting that information from the community and providing it to the police officers so that they can improve practices. That's really gets down to the mission of PCCEP in my mind.
So if people are suggesting a separate meeting for that, do you think the DA should be part of that meeting, or should be part of the our general board meeting?
I think it would be more helpful to be a part of our general board meeting, because I feel like that's a different conversation. I feel like that's like kind of like maybe his role and what he plans to do. He would have more space in there. But I also know Anne has some thoughts on it, so I'll let her say what she's going to say.
Well, so that would be different than bringing groups together. So the DA, having the DA come to a meeting and talk about where he's going, his direction.
I mean, it could be that I think there's a role for him to come to both of those meetings. I think him coming to PCCEP and saying, this is what's going on. And then if he's willing to come to this other meeting, because clearly his role in the policing of protests is going to be key depending on who he decides to prosecute. So I think having someone from the DA's office there would be helpful if we do a town hall.
And he said today in his news conference that he's interested in collaboration, which I think we're interested in that too. That would be great.
The only other caveat is though, what if he can't come? So just thinking of some backup plan if he's not able to make this meeting. Amy, you got a thought? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to this again because I guess it's really important. We need to set aside time at the meeting at the end of this month or whenever it is for amendment to the bylaws because we'll have only 1 month to get them out. And then in November, if you want to change anything, we'd be able to. But if you don't do it in September, we have to wait till next year or later. We won't be able to do it in November. Because they got to be out for public viewing for 30 days.
This
Amendment.
is the amendment to change the alternate.
Yeah.
And the secretary. If you want to change the secretary
I think
and the alternate and the officers, you know, like what everybody's going to do, you can write it in one single amendment. We vote on it at the PCCEP general meeting, and then it gets posted for any community review for 30 days, and then we bring it back in our October meeting to solidify that we can make changes in November. So we can make a ballot or whatever we need to do for November.
I think I think that's spot on. I think that we need to look at the entire process. I think there's gonna be a lot of maybe recommendations that might come out of officer roles and passing what we feel should be the new mission of PCCEP. Like there's a whole process. We want to codify PCCEP from what the mayor's office laid out today, that they want to know what we view our purpose as, like what our role is going forward. Does it stay the same? Does it want to change? And I think that's a discussion that will take time to have. And so I suggest we use one of the hours. So we have like, what, 2.5 hours. We use one of the hours for that and bring some of those ideas that you're saying. We have the September meeting, and we also have the October meeting to pass that before the November meeting. So I don't think we have to rush it now, but I think we need to bring.
Latiana, you're missing what I said. Any amendments to general bylaws must be posted for 30 days prior to doing anything with it. It's the rules. If
Right.
you want to change anything, we have to change it in September.
I think what Lakiana is saying is we could have the discussion about it, and then, you know, that would be the posting, so not vote on it. I mean, we wouldn't vote on it at that meeting.
That's what I'm
We
saying.
would just start discussing it.
We can do it in October because there's still 30 days before the November meeters, or even September. But I'm saying, I'm not disagreeing with them. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be posted in August.
Not October. October is the 30-day month that everything gets. It's okay. If you don't want to change it, we don't have to change it. It just means in November, we'll be voting for an alternate chair. That's all it means. We cannot change anything in November unless we fix it now. I've been doing this a long time on committees, and the bylaws are
right. I'm not saying I'm not wanting to change it. I'm not saying I don't want to change it. I'm saying we have September as well. But if you want to bring it up now, I would suggest drafting it. But I think what I was saying is there's going to be a lot of changes, and so I think we need time to look at all of those and have that as a full discussion. And we haven't had that with the whole committee. So
I'm good to wait. It's fine with me. I just wanted you to know that we can't do new officer positions in November. That's all I'm saying. That will not be an option legally.
I'm just wondering, I appreciate that. I'm just wondering if we want to make those kind of changes right now. I mean, we certainly can. I think it would be nice for us to kind of shift for a moment now and talk about the agenda for our meeting. We're over now, and I just want to kind of move.
Yeah. So
move in that direction. I also wanted to say that I know in that meeting that we were in today, I'd like to bring that information into our meeting too, and discuss what, you know, the issues that we were presented with.
Well, I heard two things being for the the August 25th meeting. One is to discuss the police directives, and the second one is to discuss the mission and the general idea of where PCCEP is going to go after the settlement agreement. That combined with the committee reports, that's a full 2 hours. So I think if we could stick to that for the next meeting, that could be the agenda. And then if people think it's a good idea, I'm happy to try to organize this town hall and reach out to the PPB and reach out to the DA's office, unless you, Lackawanna, you think the DA should come also to the general board meeting.
I think eventually, maybe. I don't think it's a huge priority for us right now. I think that community discussion sounds good. The agenda for the end of this month sounds good. There's something else I was gonna say. Yeah, so we had that planned meeting next week to talk about codifying PCCEP. So we're not doing that, so we can kind of combine that into there. And I think we might have to eventually think about maybe a special meeting around that as well, and hearing from these different groups. But I think we can start it at the end of this month by just having a discussion amongst ourselves and with the community as far as our purpose. And maybe what we also do is between now and then is kind of start putting together once, so Nicole's going to put together a timeline or a one-pager on like what she sees as like what the steps we got to do. And once we get that, we can kind of then plan out between now and November or whatever, what steps we need to take, including Amy's suggestion and other people's stuff of like changes we need to make and like when those need to be done by, and kind of putting out a timeline for ourselves of what needs to happen when.
Sounds good.
That
Could I
sounds
just
good.
ask one clarifying question about our report? We need a deadline for that, or I fear it's not going to happen. So, Theo, when do you think you could get? You said by next Friday the recommendation list you can get to us.
Yeah.
And what about the other parts about tracking like membership and flux in membership and sort of just compiling, all the meetings, the list of meetings? Some of this is in the COCL report, I think Dan said, but I think, just trying to put together a report that basically documents the work that we've done.
Yeah, why doesn't PCCEP, are you all comfortable with PCCEP staff taking a crack at the report and then presenting to you all? Because I'll have that initial thing done by next Friday with the recommendations and the links. And then PCCEP staff can work on a report. And if you all want to take a look at it and then add your voice to it, add whatever makes sense to you, add some super sweet flair, some stickers or some stamp, whatever you guys want, you guys can add to that. But I think because staff has, like, we're here to support you, I think this is something that we can do in support of your work, so you don't have to worry about it and you can look it over. So you're not creating the document necessarily, but you have final approval of the document.
Well, also we could edit it.
I would hope you would.
I would suggest that people, if they have ideas for sections, to just send them to Theo, and so and maybe look back at Andrew's reports, as models for how to do that. So let's shoot for for the September meeting to get that out to the public.
Sounds great.
Okay, so we do got to open up to public comment. The agenda that we have set is to use 1 hour to talk about codifying PCCEP and the direction that we want PCCEP to go as far as like what our mission is and our purpose post-settlement agreement and going forward. And then the other hour is going to be spent reviewing PPB, Portland Police Bureau directives. And then we have subcommittee reports and things of that nature. And then there was also a comment about getting a recommendation to change the PCCEP alternate position and doing away with that position and figuring out some time to put that on the agenda before November. Public comment on any of that. I see Barb has her hand up.
Okay.
Get in the camera.
Sorry to have to say this, guys, but this isn't on directly what Lackawanna gave that list of, and it's got to be said. Black Lives Matter, but this group is doing nothing toward mental health. Nothing. And that's not going to fly. Okay? It really isn't. And I know certain things have happened and blah, 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 but it's got to stop. We had one discussion where we talked about intersectionality, and that's all great. But if you read the settlement agreement, there's two parts to it. And there was one part that was a bigger focus. So I would really appreciate it as someone with lived experience at the cross section of a lot of things. I can't help that I'm a straight white woman. If you could look toward doing a few things toward the behavioral health end of this spectrum that we're on, some way, somehow, soon. And I think that's basically it. Thank you.
Barb, I want to ask, while we have you, it was my understanding or thinking that those ideas would best come out of the subcommittee that on behavioral health. Is that, are you thinking of something other than that, or is that where it should come from?
You at the behavioral health subcommittee last week.
Yeah, and it was totally something else that we discussed.
And Elliot,
Yes.
do you know why it was something else? Because there was no communication between staff at the steering committee when everybody realized that the COCO needed to do their report. The behavioral health subcommittee said, hey, you can use half of our time if it only is half of our time. But that's not what happened. And I know full well if Theo had been in that meeting, he wouldn't have let us do that. Okay, so I understand that mistakes happen, etc. But that was the second week in a row that we had to cancel one of our second month in a row that Casey got put off as far as a speaker. I think he was fine with it because he's tired. But if you look at what's going on and the amount of time that's being spent in one direction and not the other, it's not gonna fly.
So could I make a suggestion?
Not gonna fly with my community. And on top of that, all right, you guys are not a safe you guys are not a safe group yet for me to be inviting my community. Okay? So there needs to be some time spent on that.
One suggestion would be that maybe not, instead of waiting for the next month for the behavioral health subcommittee to just schedule like a special meeting, since that previous meeting got usurped.
I realize you think that that's okay, but
I'm just saying, I'm trying to think of a way to resolve the concern.
Elliot, that is worse. That is an example of putting it off, because if you change the date and the time of something that's supposed to be routine, how do you get people to count on it going? It's I'm done.
Okay, if that's not a good idea, then it's not a good idea. I was just suggesting what's happened, you know, what happened at the last meeting happened. So in the question of urgency, like we've had lots of special meetings, that it might be saying, okay, look, that happened, so that's why we're gonna schedule another behavioral health subcommittee. But Amy is the chair of that, and she will decide what to do.
Theo, you have something to say?
Yeah, thank you, Barb, for sharing your perspective. I appreciate it. I wanted to mention that this, as staff, we learn. As staff, I think we've learned that we can't have any subcommittee, whether it be the behavioral health subcommittee, the settlement agreement and policy subcommittee. We can't have any subcommittee host the COCO, the compliance officer reports. Those need to be independent. And I mentioned in the previous meeting that we would do that. Every compliance officer report from now on will be independent of subcommittees. So I do apologize that happened. I certainly would never want to infringe on the behavioral health subcommittee time. And I do think it's also important that the community hear from the compliance officer, because it is important. So it doesn't have to be either or in terms of that, but both need some good time allocations for them. So I appreciate you bringing up the last meeting, and I'm sorry that got pushed off, and I hope you don't think it was meant out of a place of disrespect, because certainly we value that. I value, and I know that everybody on this call values the input of folks experiencing mental health crises just from my personal life.
Community that if anybody else substituted their community in there and thought about how this group has done it, has gone towards their little group, they wouldn't be happy either. And having Elliot, no offense, Elliot, say what he said, just show it. It's an example of it. It's an example of you guys not listening to me. Probably because I get all excited about shit. But guess what, guys? Red hair. You're forewarned.
Part of dealing with the behavioral health community.
You know, we all only get to see things through one set of eyes, and we all learn from each other. So I appreciate you both saying a lot of things. And I know that this is an important thing for all of us. So I appreciate you both speaking with honesty and integrity.
Yeah, all I would say to that is I welcome suggestions and ideas of what we can do to improve on that. So, matter of fact, yeah, I'm gonna follow up with you, Barb. I have some thoughts on that too. And I think we also need to have grace for people too, just to be able to ask questions and to make suggestions, and kind of going back to our bylaws and just assuming positive intent. And that's, I think that's important too. When we ask questions, when we make suggestions about things, yeah, being able to do that. Barbara, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I know this is really hard, and I appreciate that you're plowing through all of this. What I'm concerned about is that Barb Rainish said that she didn't feel comfortable inviting anybody from her community to this group. So I think that needs to be worked on. I don't know how.
Agreed.
Okay. So maybe Barb could, I don't know if Barb, can say what would be needed or not. If she's
Barb will take care of saying this more directly to PCCEP people as we go forward. I think that's a better way to do it. And we're way over time.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Barb. Barb.
Where are we getting back?
Any other PCCEP feedback or comments on the agenda, on anything that was just discussed? Okay, just to review what we have gone through today, we discussed the metrics data from the Amici groups, agreed that we want to incorporate as much of this feedback and have a dialogue. There's a meeting on Friday. What time is that meeting at, Ann?
Sorry, 10.
Yes, the comment for directives is due on 9/1. We're always going to be out of time.
10 o'clock. The second thing we discussed is creating a spreadsheet for recommendations. Theo and Claudia are going to work on that, I believe. Officer roles, we discussed the roles of the secretary and possibly changing that to the accountability officer, the roles of the co-chairs, and the need, if there is a need for the alternate co-chair position. We skipped over the PPP directives, but we agreed to add it to the August meeting, and we, at the end of this meeting, we drafted our August agenda, which will include a discussion on codifying PCCEP and the PPP directives, and then a possible special meeting on the ongoing protests and hearing from officers and community members alike. And then at the very end was also discussed the need to make PCCEP a safer space for those experiencing mental and behavioral health. That is an ongoing conversation that will continue. So that wraps up our meeting. I appreciate everybody staying 19 minutes over time. I appreciate the passionate discussion, appreciate our staff and our community members and PCCEP, of course. Thank you all. Have a good night. If there's no other comment, I'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Lakiana.
Thank you all for your time tonight.
Yep, peace.
Thanks, everybody.